Psychology was meant to heal the human mind, but some experiments went far beyond understanding behavior into the territory of control, cruelty, and chaos. What you're about to hear are not horror stories. They're real experiments conducted by real scientists that push the limits of what it means to be human. These are the 10 most dangerous psychology experiments ever conducted. 1. The Stanford Prison Experiment, 1971. It began as a simple study about power and authority. Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a psychologist at Stanford University, built a mock prison in the basement of his department. 24 healthy, ordinary young men volunteered. Half were assigned as guards, the others as prisoners. But within 36 hours, the illusion became terrifyingly real. Guards began abusing prisoners, forcing them to strip, depriving them of sleep, humiliating them for discipline. The prisoners broke down, crying, screaming, begging to leave. Zimbardo, the lead scientist, got so lost in his own experiment that he acted as the prison warden, allowing the cruelty to continue. It was meant to last 2 weeks. It ended in 6 days. The Stanford prison experiment revealed a horrifying truth. Give ordinary people power, and they can turn into monsters. 2. The Milgram obedience experiment, 1961. Could people really torture others just because they were told to? Dr. Stanley Milgram decided to find out. He invited volunteers to a Yale University lab, telling them they'd be part of a learning study. Each participant played the role of a teacher, ordered to deliver electric shocks to another person, the learner, for every wrong answer. What the teachers didn't know was that the shocks were fake. The screams they heard were recordings. Yet 65% of people went all the way, to the maximum 450 volts, simply because a man in a white lab coat told them to continue. No one was actually hurt, but the emotional trauma was real. Participants later described nightmares, guilt, and horror when they realized what they were capable of. Milgram's experiment showed that the most dangerous obedience isn't found in dictatorships. It's found in the human heart. 3. Project MK-Ultra, 1953-1960s. This one didn't happen in a university. It happened in secret, under the CIA. Project MK-Ultra was the U.S. government's mind control program, a chilling attempt to control human thought using LSD, hypnosis, electroshock, and sensory deprivation. Unwitting subjects, prisoners, hospital patients, and even ordinary citizens were drugged without consent. Some lost their sanity, others never recovered. At least one man, Frank Olson, allegedly died after being dosed and pushed to psychological collapse. When the project was exposed in the 1970s, thousands of files had already been destroyed. We may never know the full extent of what was done. MK-Ultra proved that the darkest experiments aren't always in the lab. Sometimes they're hidden behind government walls. 4. The Monster Study, 1939. In a small orphanage in Iowa, 22 children were chosen for what was described as a speech study. Half were praised and encouraged for speaking fluently. The other half were belittled, criticized, and told they had speech problems, even if they didn't. The result? Children from the negative group developed real speech disorders, anxiety, and lifelong self-esteem issues. The lead researcher, Wendell Johnson, never intended to cause harm, but the damage was irreversible. The study was so controversial that it remained hidden for decades. It earned its name for a reason, not because of the children, but because of the people who did it to them. 5. The Little Albert Experiment, 1920. Imagine using a baby to prove a theory of fear. That's exactly what behaviorist John B. Watson did. He wanted to know if fear could be taught. So he placed a 9-month-old baby, known as Little Albert, in front of a white rat. At first, Albert smiled and played with it. Then, every time the rat appeared, Watson struck a metal bar behind Albert's head, a loud, terrifying noise. Albert began to cry at the sight of the rat, and soon he feared anything white and furry, rabbits, dogs, even a Santa Claus beard. No one ever deconditioned him. Little Albert disappeared from records. He was just a child, and his fear became his legacy. 6. The David Reimer Case, 1965. This is one of the most tragic cases in medical psychology. David Reimer was born a healthy boy, but a botched surgery destroyed his genitals. Psychologist Dr. John Money believed gender was entirely learned, not biological. He convinced David's parents to raise him as a girl, Brenda. Through therapy sessions and conditioning, David was told to embrace a female identity. But he never felt right. By adolescence, he rejected the identity forced on him and transitioned back to male. Years of psychological abuse, confusion, and public exposure left him traumatized. In 2004, David Reimer took his own life. Dr. Money's experiment was hailed as proof that gender could be shaped, but it became one of psychology's darkest lessons about identity and consent. 7. The Pit of Despair, 1970. Psychologist Harry Harlow wanted to study depression, and he did it in the cruelest way imaginable. He took baby monkeys, isolated them in small steel cages for months, and watched them break. They stopped eating. They stopped moving. They clung to themselves and rocked back and forth in silence. When released, they couldn't socialize, couldn't mate, some refused to live. Harlow called his device the Pit of Despair. And though his findings taught us about attachment and mental illness, they came at a cost no creature should endure. 8. The Aversion Project. 1970s, South Africa. During apartheid, the South African military used psychological therapy as a weapon. Gay soldiers were subjected to electric shocks, drug injections, and even forced sex change surgeries, all in the name of curing homosexuality. Many were left mutilated, mentally broken, or dead. This was not therapy. It was torture, disguised as science. The Aversion Project is a haunting reminder that when psychology serves ideology, humanity disappears. 9. Nazi hypothermia experiments. 1942-1943. Inside concentration camps, Nazi doctors carried out chilling experiments in freezing conditions. Prisoners were stripped naked, thrown into ice-cold water, and monitored as they slowly froze to study survival limits for German soldiers. Many died in agony. Those who survived suffered permanent damage. These experiments gave rise to modern medical ethics because they showed us what happens when science loses its soul. 10. The Third Wave Experiment, 1967. A high school teacher, Ron Jones, wanted to show his students how easily fascism can rise. So he created a movement called the Third Wave, with slogans, uniforms, and strict rules of obedience. Within days, students were spying on each other, reporting dissenters, and saluting their leader. The class turned into a cult. Jones ended the experiment after only 5 days, terrified by how quickly they had fallen under control. The third wave proved that dictatorship isn't forced upon people. It's invited in, one rule at a time. These experiments changed psychology forever. They taught us about obedience, fear, and human cruelty, but at a cost no one should ever pay again. The line between science and suffering is thin, and then crossed, it leaves scars that never heal. So the next time you hear the word experiment, remember, behind every discovery, there might be a story of pain. If you like this video, subscribe for more dark psychology insights.